Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jaya Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Jhansi, the League of Devotees. Keshav Maharaj and his party stayed for several days in Jhansi, holding kirtans and lectures. They had an appointment with Reva Shankar Bhayal, but Mr. Bhayal broke it, so they had to wait to see him on another day. Meanwhile, Keshav Maharaj had time to form an opinion of Jhansi and discuss with Abhay the likelihood of making his headquarters. He noted that the people were receptive, but the location was too remote. Even before meeting with Mr. Bhayal, Keshav Maharaj felt reluctant to stake his whole mission in Jhansi. Abhay agreed, aware that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had said that a preacher should go into the big cities and not practice his bhajan in seclusion. And he admitted that after 2 years in Jhansi, he had made no full-time followers. When they finally met with Mr. Bhayal failed to present clear terms for purchasing the property. He said that they were eligible to have it, but he made their use of the buildings conditional. He wanted to have a say in the nature of the programs they would hold. Abhay knew that this was just a further sign of shady dealings, and he suspected that Mr. Bhayal was under mounting pressure to give the buildings over to the Mahila Samiti. Keshav Maharaj, having lost all interest, decided to go back to Mathura, and he invited Abhay to join him. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Something came to mind just reading this paragraph. So sometimes when you're having, or when we want to organize some programs, it's also good to be, we don't want to be involved in organizations that have too many conditions, because then we can't do our program. So we've got to be careful that we don't. Sometimes we want to collaborate with someone, but then once you do, we find that they've got their conditions, and then our program might be affected. So something that's come up in the past. So we'll continue on to reading Srimad Bhagavatam this morning. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari, Jaya Radha Madhava कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन भज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन भज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन भज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन भज जन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हे हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय श्री श्री राम जय भगवान जय श्री गौड़ताय की जय श्री प्रभुपाद जय गौर ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavato Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 21, entitled Instructions by Maharaj Prithu, Text 43. Teshamaham padasarojarenum Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Nasyatyamum Sarva Guna Bhajanti Teshamaham padasarojarenum Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Nasyatyamum Sarva Guna Bhajanti Teshamaham padasarojarenum Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Nasyatyamum Sarva Guna Bhajanti. Shamaham padasarojarenum Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Yeshamaham padasarojarenum Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Nasyatyamum Sarva Guna Bhajanti. Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Nasyatyamum Sarva Guna Bhajanti. Eshamaham padasarojarenum Arya Vaheya Dikiritamaya Yam Nityadabhim Vrata Ashupapam Nasyatyamum Sarva Guna Bhajanti. Tesham, of all of them, Aham, I, Pada, feet, Saroja, lotus, Venum, dust, Aryaha, O respectable person, Vaheya, shall bear Adi up to Kiritam, helmet, Ayuhu, up to the end of life, Yam, which Nityada, always, Bibrata, carrying, Ashu, very soon, Papam, sinful activity, Nasyati, our banquet, Amum, all those, Sarva Guna, fully qualified, Bhajanti, worship. Please hear the translation and purport by His Divine Grace, by Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta. Prabhupada. Jai. O respectable personalities present here, I beg the blessings of all of you that I may perpetually carry on my crown the dust of the lotus feet of such Brahmanas and Vaishnavas until the end of my life. He who can carry such dust on his head is very soon relieved of all the reactions which arise from sinful life. And eventually he develops all good and desirable qualities. Purport. It is said that one who has unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which means unflinching faith in the Vaishnava or the pure devotee of the Supreme Lord, develops all the good qualities of the demigods. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavati akinchana sarve gunes tattva samasate sura. Bhagavatam 5:18-12. Prahlad Maharaj also said, Naisham matistavad urukramangrim. Bhagavatam 7:5-32. Unless one takes the dust of the lotus feet of a pure Vaishnava on one's head, one cannot understand what the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. And unless one knows the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one's life remains imperfect. A great soul who has fully surrendered to the Supreme Lord after understanding Him fully and after repeatedly undergoing austerities and penances for many, many lives is very rare. The crown of a king is simply a big load if the king or head of state does not actually bear the dust of the lotus feet of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. In other words, if a liberal king like Prithu Maharaj does not follow the instruction of Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, or does not follow the Brahminical culture, he is simply a burden on the state. Or he cannot benefit the citizen. Maharaj Prithu is the perfect example of an ideal chief executive. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakandita He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namam Vishnu. Namam Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanam. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani, Vishesha Chandra Pachai. Mukhaṁ karoti vācālam pangum langāyate girim yatkripātamaham vande Shri Guru Nitariham Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishra. Hare Krishna. So today we're continue discussing the pastimes of Maharaj Prithu. So we're at the point where Maharaj Prithu has finished his 99 Ashwamedha Yajnas, had darshan of Vishnu, asked for some benedictions, and he was blessed by Vishnu and given many instructions for Lord Vishnu. Then he returns back to his kingdom, and he ruled his kingdom so perfectly. As a king, he was looking after all the material needs of his citizens as well as the spiritual needs. And to considering their spiritual needs, he decided to do another sacrifice. And this sacrifice, when everyone is assembled, he was giving different instructions for their spiritual benefit. And as he starts instructing them, because he has already had darshan of Lord Vishnu and he's got all the good qualities. So he could have just sat there and started instructing them, but the way he started off was filled with so much humility. He didn't say, I speak and you listen. He said, come, let us all come together and try to reach the conclusions of bhakti together. Not I'll tell you and you listen. So that way he was very humble. And he was sort of begging them. He said, I'm a king. I'm just doing my service as a king. Krishna has put me in this position. So therefore, please help me, cooperate with me so that I can do my duty. My duty as a king is to make sure that you follow dharma. And he spoke about varnashram dharma, about the varnashram duty. And then he started establishing that God exists, God is a person, and that pure devotional service is the way to attain God. And then the citizens, they might have asked, because he's talking about the highest thing, pure devotional service, and we are all following Varnashram Dharma. Many were Grihasthas. There was like Arjuna asked Krishna, he said, oh, the system of yoga you're propounding seems a bit impractical. So similarly, the citizens might have asked, how are we all Grihasthas engaged in so many of our duties? How can we do this pure devotional service? It seems difficult. And then he describes karma mishra bhakti. Yat karosi, yat dasnasi, yat vihosi, dadasi, yat tapasya kaunteya, tat kurusha madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you give away in charity, austerities you do it as an offering to me. And the citizens are very happy with this, and they said, yes, thank you very much. We will continue doing our Varnashram Dharma. And so they were thanking Prithu Maharaj for these instructions. And Prithu Maharaj, out of humility, he says, no, thank you all for following these rules and regulations nicely, for following Varnashram Dharma nicely, because when you follow this and you achieve the ultimate goal, then I have done my duty. So you're helping me fulfill my duty as a king, as an ideal king. And then at that point, he starts, how to do this pure devotional service. What is the way to do it? How can we practice this? Then he speaks about, well, how not to do it, which is to offend Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. And then after that, he talks about worshipping or serving the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, because that's the only way to attain pure devotional service. And then he glorifies, he said, the Lord himself worships the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Then he, in the pastime of the Kumaras meeting Jay and Vijay, when they became when they got upset, Vijay and Vijay, when they refused to give them entry into Vaikuntha. At that point, Lord Vishnu comes. And then he glorifies the Brahmana. This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Yesham Vibarmi Aham Akanda Vaikuntha Yoga Maya Vibhutir Amalangri Raja Kirti. I'll just go straight to the translation. He says, I am the master of my internal energy, and the water that washes my feet, the Ganga that carries my remnants. And that water sanctifies the three worlds, and Lord Shiva bears it upon his head. And I myself, my lotus feet washing is purifying all these three worlds, but I myself take the dust of the Vaishnavas on my head. So who else will refuse to do this? So he talks about serving the Vaishnavas, and then he's Vaishnavas and Brahmanas. And then he explains further who are the Vaishnavas, what are the qualities of the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, because if not, anyone can, there are many Brahmanas out there, caste Brahmana, born in Brahmana family. So we'll be serving so many different people. And instead of getting bhakti, we might get other results. So he's explaining, Prithu Maharaj is explaining the qualities of the Brahmanas so that we can understand by the qualities who's Brahmana, who's Vaishnava, and then we can serve them. And in this verse, King Prithu is talking about how we can serve these Vaishnavas. He's talking about taking the dust of the lotus feet of these Vaishnavas, placing it upon his crown. So the pure devotee of the Lord, he's always situated at the lotus feet of the Lord. And therefore, he's able to give Krishna. Therefore, by serving the lotus feet of the pure devotee of the Lord, then we can get Krishna. So Krishna is the property of his unalloyed devotees. As a pastime of the first child born in Krishna consciousness, Saraswati, in ISKCON. And how Srila Prabhupada used to joke with her, play with her, and he was hiding the toy of Krishna behind his back. And she was searching for the doll, and she couldn't find Krishna anywhere. And then she saw Srila Prabhupada was hiding something behind his back. And she went there, and then she found Prabhupada there. Or somebody asked her, who has Krishna? They're referring to the doll. And then she said, Prabhupada has Krishna. And the pure devotee has Krishna, and therefore he can give Krishna to others. And Krishna is independent. It says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmadiyasya yato anyavad itaratash achartesh abhigyasvarat. He is fully cognizant and fully independent. Then later on in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when in the pastime between Maharaj Ambrish and Durvasa Muni, when Durvasa Muni was running from the Sudarshan Chakra, and he went to Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and finally he came to Vishnu. The Lord Vishnu says, he's asking to be saved, and Lord Vishnu says, no. It says, Aham Bhakta Paradhino Yasvantantra Ivad Vija Sadhu Bilgrasta Hridayo Bhaktir Bhakta Jana Priya. He says, I am completely under the control of my devotees. I am not at all independent. Because the devotees are free of material desires, I sit in the core of their hearts. He's completely dependent on the devotees. And then he says, what to speak of my devotee, even the devotees of my devotee. So Krishna is controlled by the devotees. So the devotees are able to give Krishna. So in order to obtain pure devotional service, Maharaj Prithu explains that we have to take shelter of the lotus feet, or the dust of the lotus feet of such devotees. And this theme is repeated in many parts of Srimad Bhagavatam in many pastimes. There's the pastime of Jadabharat and King Rahugana. We must be familiar with the pastime. So Bharat Maharaj, he almost perfected in his life, but because of a slight attachment to a baby deer, he had to take birth again as a deer. But in that life, he decided, because of his advancement in bhakti, he had remembrance of his past life, and he decided that he wasn't going to, he could remember where he left off, and he said, now this life, I can't do. He was in a deer's body, but he wasn't associated with other deers. He went straight to an ashram where many sadhus were, and they were always discussing Krishna Katha. And next life, he took birth as Jadabharat. To the external world, he looked like he was a fool. He wouldn't engage in any material conversation. And then somehow through different things that happened, he ended up coming on the path of the king, King Rahugana, and he was being carried in a palanquin. And they needed one more person to carry the palanquin. Maybe 4 people, and they were short of one person. And they asked, the king saw this person and said, it looks like a big, well-built person. Why don't you ask him to carry? So as he was carrying the palanquin, everyone was walking very coordinated way, but he was trying to jump over the ants and all that. So one person kept taking the palanquin, and the king was quite upset. It wasn't a smooth ride. So he started shouting and he started insulting him, saying that, he's got such a big body and he can't do this simple service. And he insulted him in many ways. And then Jadabharat tolerated him. At one point, he started explaining to him what the king's position is, and he thinks he's the king now, but past life might not have been the king. So he's explaining all this, and King Rahugana then realized that, oh, this is a very exalted personality. He's not an ordinary person. He had such realization, deep realization. So he asked him, how did you come to this realization? And beautiful verse, like this. Raghuganaita tapasanayati nache jaya nirvapanad grihadva na chandasanaiva jalagni sure vina mahatpada rajobhishekam. Vina mahatpada rajobhishekam. Mahat, all these great personalities, unless you bathe yourself with the pada raja, the dust of the lotus feet, you cannot realize the absolute truth. And he says so many other things, like just by following Varnashram Dharma, doing all sorts of yoga processes. In the summertime, surround yourself with fire. In the wintertime, you take bath in freezing cold water. So all these austerities cannot give you realization of the absolute truth. So the only way of realizing the absolute truth is by Mahat Pada Rajobhishekam, taking the dust of the lotus feet of these devotees. Not taking it, but bathing in that dust of the lotus feet. So similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, he explains, he's sitting on his father's lap, and his father asks him these questions the second time around. And he's describing Navavidha Bhakti, and his father gets so mad, and he says, where have you learned all this from? And he turns to his teacher, Sandar and Amarka. They were like, no, it's not us. They were afraid of their lives. So no, someone else must have been, Vishnu must have been coming in and disguise and teaching them. And then Prahlad Maharaj, he says this beautiful word. Naisha matista vadukramangrim spasyatyanata pagamo yadatta mahiyasham padarajo vishekam niskinchananam navrinitayavat. So again, padarajo vishekam. So he says, unless one smears his body with the dust of the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas, who are completely freed from material contamination, one cannot get attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord. So it's the recurring theme throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, King Prithu, he was the king of the whole world. And his crown signifies his wealth, his material opulence. The crown's filled with the most valuable gems. And on top of that crown, he's taking dust of the lotus feet. So that glorifies the position of that dust. He's got all the material opulence in the world, but yet it's the dust that is glorified. And in this verse, he says, how will he take this dust? He takes it upon his head and up to the end of his life. So constantly he wants to take this dust on his head. And then he says, what is the benefit of taking this dust? He who can carry such dust on his head is very soon relieved from all reactions which arise from sinful life. So all sins are destroyed. But it's not just that. After that, what happens? Then he gets pure devotional service. And when you get pure devotional service, then automatically all the good qualities develop. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavati yakinchana sarve gunais tattva samasate sura. So he's saying, I shall take the dust upon my head perpetually, and therefore I'll develop all the good qualities. Then I can become a perfect king and rule my citizens perfect. Otherwise, Prabhupada says, he is simply a burden on the state because he cannot save himself and he cannot benefit the citizens. And this is one of the first items in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. First item of devotional service is Adav Guru Padashraya, taking shelter of the lotus feet of devotees. So we'll just discuss what taking shelter of the lotus feet, taking the dust of the lotus feet of a devotee. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, 3 things are mentioned that can make you progress in spiritual life very quickly. Bhakta pada duliyara, bhakta pada ja, bhakta bhukta avashesha, tin mahabhav. Etin seva hoite, Krishna prema hoy, puna puna sarva sastre, pukari okoy. Bhakta pada duli, the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee. Bhakta pada jal, the water that has washed the feet of the lotus devotee. And bhakta bhukta, the edible remnants of the devotee. These 3 things are very powerful. And by rendering service to these 3 things, ecstatic love for Krishna will develop. And puna puna sarva sastra, the scriptures keep repeating this. And we've seen just a few pastimes in Srimad Bhagavatam that have repeated this. And throughout, that's mentioned in our scripture. So one way of getting the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee that's closest to us is our spiritual master. So we can physically take the dust of the lotus feet of our spiritual master. And that is very important, as you've seen from Chaitanya Charitamrita. But not all of us are fortunate to do that. And definitely not all the time. And it says Rajo Bhishek Bhakta Pada Rajo Bhishekam. It's not taking a little bit, but bathing in the dust. So that might be difficult to get that much dust for us to bathe in. But that could mean doing some direct service to the physical body of the spiritual master. Now the problem is, will do pure devotees just put out their feet and ask you to please take the dust from my feet? Spiritual masters do that. Pure devotees, they are very protective. They don't generally allow people to take dust from their lotus feet. And we see that in our own dealings with different sadhus or spiritual master. We see from Srila Prabhupada's example, the ones his disciple Ishan Das, he was mentioning, he says, all these people, they come and touch my feet, especially Indians, he mentioned, that they come and touch my feet because they want some kind of material benediction. And he says, don't allow them to do it, because they will transfer all their sinful reactions to me. And the devotee said, no, but Srila Prabhupada, the devotees, the disciples, your disciples, they want to show their respect. Srila Prabhupada said, that's fine, but they're still, I have to suffer for their sinful reaction. And this was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master also. He was very, very, he wouldn't like devotees touching his lotus feet, because they have some material motivation when they come and they touch the lotus feet. They want to get rid of all their sinful reactions. But after that, they're going to go back, they're going to commit more sinful reactions. And then the sadhu has to suffer. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur is his spiritual master, Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. If someone came to touch his feet, he would say, I curse you that your whole family will die. So then people will stop coming to touch the lotus feet. So the pure devotees, they are not, they are very protective of their lotus feet. They don't allow anyone and everyone to go and touch the lotus. So then what do we do if we can't touch their lotus feet to get the dust? Then what else can we do to get the dust? So another way to understand the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master or the sadhu is, the dust can refer to his instructions. So with giving up our false pride and ego and trying to execute the instructions of the spiritual master of the sadhu, or to accept his mood and mission to help, to serve in his mission, that is accepting the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. We can understand from Srila Prabhupada's entire life how he dedicated his life to taking the dust of the lotus feet of his spiritual master. He got many instructions from his father on devotional service, but from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he got some really very special instruction. Writing books, distributing books, if you have money, print books. The Brihat Mridanga. This was instruction that he didn't get. He got many other instructions from his father, but from his spiritual father, he got these very significant instructions, preached to the English-speaking world. And he spent the rest of his life just fulfilling these desires, the instructions of his spiritual master and the mission of his spiritual master. Till his last breath, he was translating books for us. So he says, Srila Prabhupada quoting, he says, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the only secret of success. So serving the instructions of the spiritual master and his mission, that is also serving the dust of the lotus feet. And what do you find that when we say like the title Prabhupada, Prabhupada has got, it's described at least two meanings. One is one who is situated at the lotus feet of the Supreme Prabhu, Krishna, one who's situated at the lotus feet of Krishna. Another meaning is one at whose lotus feet many Prabhus are there. At Prabhupada's lotus feet, there's so many devotees, disciples. This Bhakta Padaduli, the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master, could also represent all his disciples, his followers. So that is also the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. And we can take that dust by serving the followers, the disciples. And that is actually our goal, right? Gopi Bhattu Pada Kamaleva Dasana Dasana. We want to become the servants of the servant. So by serving the disciples of the sadhu spiritual master, we also taking the dust of the lotus feet. And as King Kulashekar Alva in Mukunda Mala Stotra, he repeats his verse where he is saying how to become a servant. He said, Majjan Manapalamidam Madhukaita Bare, Mad Prataniya Mad Anugraha Esha Eva, Vadbhritya Bhritya Paricharaka Bhritya Bhritya Bhritasya Bhritya Itimam Smaralokanata. So he mentions the word servant 7 times in this verse. He doesn't want to be a servant of the Lord. He wants to be a servant of the servant. And that's our goal. And we can, by doing that, we can please the spiritual master, and that will be taking the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, last week we had his disappearance day. Disappearance. And we were singing of quite a few different bhajans. One of them was Sudha Bhakata Charano Renu, Bhajana Anukula, Bhakata Seva Parama Siddhi, Prema Latikara Mula. Translation is dust of the lotus feet of pure devotee, enthusiastic devotional service and service to pure devotees. They nourish the root of the creeper of devotion. We've all heard the analogy of the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of devotion, and how it's planted in a fertile ground, how it's nourished, the process of watering and then protecting it from weeds, and how the creeper grows. And in every stage, the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master is required. By serving the dust of the lotus feet of spiritual master, our heart becomes, well, first the sadhu, our heart becomes soft, the barren land becomes fertile. Then by serving the spiritual master, he gives the seed. And then the process of watering, Shravanam Kirtanam, also comes from serving the spiritual master. What are we hearing? We're hearing his lectures, his instructions, and then we're repeating. And he's giving us the association to protect ourselves from the weed. And that constant watering by serving him, listening to his instructions, hearing from him, repeating, engaging in Navavidha Bhakti under his instruction. Then that Bhakti Lata just grows slowly, and then it gets some support again from your devotee of Lord, from the Guru, by serving his instructions. And then that Bhakti Lata creeper, explain how it grows, pierces the covering of the material universe. It goes past the Vaikuntha planets, past Ayodhya Dham, past Mathura, Dwarka, and it goes into Goloka Vrindavan. And once it grows to Goloka Vrindavan, it doesn't stop until it reaches the lotus feet of Radha. And then that bud blossoms into a flower and the fruit of your devotional service. Fructifying. And this act of pure devotional, of serving the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master, is, as King Prithu Maharaj explains it, till the end of his life, it's constant. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives commentary on verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. And Srila Prabhupada appreciated this so much, and this was something that kept him going throughout his life. Read that to you. Srila Prabhupada said he was so moved by this commentary that it fixed him in his resolve to follow Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's order. Of all kinds of intelligence, the best intelligence focused on Bhakti Yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, one's intelligence becomes single-pointed or fixed in determination. One thinks the instructions of my spiritual master to worship the personality of Godhead by chanting, remembering, serving his feet, and so on are my only sadhana, my only sadhya, my only livelihood. I am incapable of giving up these instructions either in the stage of practice or in the stage of perfection. They alone are my object of desire and my only responsibility. Besides them, I can desire no other responsibility, not even in my dream. It is all the same to me whether I feel happy or unhappy, or whether my physical existence is eradicated or not. That was commentary that the Prabhupada said moved him to continuously take the dust of the lotus feet of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. And now, what are some qualities that we need to have in order to get this dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master? So many qualities. One that came to mind is laulyam, intense greed. Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati. It says Tatra Laulyam Ekamulyam. Janma Koti Sukrite Nalabhyate. Even during hundreds of years of pious activities, you cannot get Krishna Bhakti. Well, you need one thing, there's intense greed, then you can get. So the greed to have the association of pure devotees of our spiritual master. And seeing that greed will get so much opportunity. When can we, whenever the spiritual master is here, or just constantly trying to hear his instructions, serve Vaishnavas whenever there's some, wherever the Vaishnava is, we can go. Especially Grihasthas, we have so many excuses, which are valid, but still we have to have the intense greed so some things can be adjusted so that we can go where the sadhana is, have this association, have darshan, or make time to hear these instructions. It says even a moment's association, the sadhu can give us all perfection. But the sadhus are such that they're not like us. Our actions are very random. If we have a plate of nice prasad and there's some nice sweet there, we might go straight for the sweet, depending on what the tongue is attracted to. But the sadhus, every action, every movement is for the pleasure of Krishna. So the way they're eating, the way they're walking, the way they're talking, the way they're placing something, every action of the sadhu can give us so much instruction. We've got to have greed. And another quality is the quality of crying. Guru Govinda Maharaj mentions that very often about crying. You have to cry for the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master or the sadhu. And again, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has got many different bhajans. Yogyata vichare kichu nahi pai tumara karuna sar Karunana hoile, kandiya kandiya, prananara bhoara. Because if you examine me, you'll find no good qualities. Your mercy is all that I'm made of. If you're not merciful unto me, then I will not be able to maintain my life. Crying and crying, I will give up. We can cry for the opportunity to get the dust of the lotus feet of spiritual master. Like that, there are many other bhajans. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says every morning we sing Yasya Prasadan, Bhagavat Prasadan, Yasya Prasadan, Agati. So the dust of our spiritual master, the sadhus, are our only wealth, our only shelter. So we could also meditate how we can constantly take this dust upon our heads, bathe ourselves in the dust, Padarajo Abhishekam, and thereby our lives will also become successful like Maharaj. We'll end here. Thank you very much. I feel like an imposter because all this is theoretical. I see many devotees here who are already constantly taking the dust upon their head by serving their spiritual masters, going out every day, distributing books, following the instructions of the spiritual master, Prabhupada's instructions. They're all bathing in their dust. Maybe I could get, I'd like to share some realizations or comments. If there are any questions, I could attend. Yes, Prabhu. What I understood was not taking shelter of them, but serving them. Serving the disciples of the Guru, that's also taking the dust of the lotus. Because he'll be pleased, the spiritual master is pleased if we please his disciples, if we are serving them. And if they're serving their spiritual master nicely, they're probably repeating the instructions that they've got from their spiritual master. In that sense, if they're following perfectly what their spiritual master is saying, then what instructions they are giving won't be different from what you're getting from the spirit. And also serving them in many ways. If we are having an argument with our God brother, that's not going to be pleasing the spiritual master. And they are the dust of the lotus feet of the spiritual master, the followers. So we are offending them, then that's not going to please the spiritual master. So taking the dust means fulfilling the instructions, pleasing the spiritual master. At least that's the way I understood it. So by serving the followers, serving the God brothers, then that pleases the spiritual master. Not necessarily taking shelter of them. Anyone of the more experienced devotees clarify that point? Would anyone like to share something on that? Oh, definitely, that's one of the most potent angas of the three that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. But it's not always practical for us. But whenever the opportunity is there, we should try as far as possible, serve, and not just literally taking the dust, but also some physical service. And at least from my personal realization, Vapu Seva is very important at the beginning stage, because without the Vapu Seva, how will you develop that faith in the spiritual world? Just by being with him for a few seconds, you can realize his potency, and then you develop faith. And then whatever Vani comes after that, you will automatically follow. And then if you can't get the Vapu Seva, but because you developed that faith from that physical association, and that keeps you going and serving the Vani for the rest of your life. And I've seen, at least from my little experience, many devotees who have had some personal association or personal service. Initially, they get very fixed up and so because they've developed a lot of faith. Then after that, the spiritual master may say, okay, now you've had enough. Now you go out and do something. Like Srila Prabhupada, one disciple came and said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, I always want to remain at your lotus feet. And Srila Prabhupada said, impossible, because I'm always moving. You can't remain at my lotus. And other times he says, no, don't just remain at my lotus feet. Go out and do something tangible for me. So yes, we can do menial service, wash the cloth, cook for the spiritual master, drive him, do so many menial services. But after that, we have to go out and do something. He's going to give instructions when you're in his physical presence. So we take those instructions. Then after that, we go in the Vani. And the Vani goes on forever. So the spiritual master is eternally present. We're taking the dust for the rest of our lives because he's eternally present in his instruction. But not to minimize the Vapu Seva, about devotion. It's what I understand. Mm-hmm. The physical presence, you feel, yeah, he's the powerhouse, and we're right next to the powerhouse. But once we leave, depending on how much we're serving his instruction, then we can feel his presence and that same the same feeling of being completely Krishna conscious and completely protected. Because when you're following his instructions, it's not non-different from him being right there. With Srila Prabhupada always says that his spiritual master is always there, he's always present with him because he's fulfilling the instruction. Because the more we attempt to fulfill or follow his instructions, then we should feel that presence of the spiritual master all the time. Then that should be the same as how when we're with him physically, we feel completely Krishna conscious. But when we are away from him, from the powerhouse, the enthusiasm may go down. That same feeling won't be there. But as long as you're connected back through his instructions and following the instructions, we should be able to feel that. What I understand in theory. I had one, I could just share, there was one particular instance where I had the opportunity to serve my spiritual master for a few weeks. It was quite, because there were not many other devotees there, and it was quite some intimate association for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then when I left, I was completely, what am I doing? I don't want to leave, I don't want to come back. And the minute we landed at the airport, just got off the plane, and then I got a call from Spiritual Master Holiness Maharaj. And then he said, Guru Maharaj wants to speak to you. I took the phone and I was almost crying. I said, Guru Maharaj, I don't know what I'm doing here. I just want to be with you. I don't want to leave. And I mean, I've heard this so many times, but just hearing from him in person sort of gave me a bit more of a conviction. He said, just follow my instructions. I'm right next to you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm always with you. And so, but again, that was a long way to go to have that realization, actually feel it, because I'm not fulfilling those instructions properly, but I trust his words and the words in the scriptures that if we do follow his instructions and we please him, then he is always physically present. That explains more. Any other devotees would like to share their experiences of how they can feel their presence of their spiritual master by fulfilling his instructions? Many experienced devotees, yeah. What would you like to? That's what I understand. Hare Krishna, yes, bro. So from what I understand and others could share, the spiritual master can give us instructions through so many ways. Even in his physical presence, sometimes we get instructions through his lectures, to the God brother, and that instruction shouldn't be different from what you've already, it's in the same mood, or you've got an instruction and these other spiritual master sends different people to give you clarifications on the instruction or to make you do that, to give you more detailed instructions on how to follow that particular instruction that you give. And those instructions are, as long as we're following those instructions, he's always present. And he can give us further guidance through so many ways, like described through other devotees, through his lectures, by hearing his lectures repeatedly. And in dreams, we've seen many devotees have had further instructions through their dreams, to take sannyas, to preach, to do something. And I think, was it like His Grace Sripad Ayendra Prabhu, he had instructions came through someone else to continue the 24-hour Sankirtan. It's like this, the spiritual master can be instructing us, even in his physical presence, from so many different ways where we can't shut ourselves to that only if it comes from his mouth directly that I'll take it, but he could be helping. But we have to make sure that it's we need to, again, through Vapu Seva and by hearing our spiritual master's instructions, we know what his mood and mission is, so that if we hear something that's not in line with mood and mission of our spiritual master or the service that we're supposed to do, then we are aware that, okay, that might not be my spiritual master speaking through that person. Otherwise, there's so many ways that we just have to be receptive and not block that off. And actually, the spiritual master is telling us through that person. He'll be correcting us through someone. That's what I understand. Hare Krishna. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Vancha Kalpatarubhishta Kripa Sindhu Paritanam Pamane Vaishnave Ananta Koti Vaishnava.